read something I've written. This wouldn't necessarily appeal to me to watch somebody read something they've written, but I am recording this, and I hope you do enjoy it. But whatever. Okay, it's a section called Seeking Fundamentals from Volume 2 of Relativistic Skepticism. The search for first principles. What a mistaken but important endeavor. The mistake that these principles you find can never be first. The import that these are fundamentals. They do more work than other ideas. The idea being, for example, stored in the web, to be, and the idea of action, stored in the verb to do, are fundamental to language. Their character can be seen used again and again in thousands of other verbs, and they can be substituted synonymously in phrases to replace many of these verbs. They are important, not because eventually we find the true first, but because as we get further along an infinite line of fundamentals, we improve the resolution of our image of what it is we really think, what the model of which these are fundamentals is really about. Eventually, you find fundamentals for your model fine enough to realize your model itself was incomplete. You can create a new one with fundamentals informed by the evolution of your last model and the characteristics of its principles, which you will have been able, with your high resolution, to break down into desirable and undesirable parts. The new fundamentals upon which you found your new model will undoubtedly resemble what were recognized by you as the good parts of the old fundamentals. As the new fundamentals, they will still be rough. You will see ideas from which to derive these fundamentals, and those ideas will become the new fundamental understanding. What were fundamentals will become theorems of the model, principles still for many of what will have become high-level arguments, while low-level arguments will go on at the new, smaller scale of the new, smaller fundamentals. These are the fundamentals as I have found them. First, there is a question. Oops, I lost my place. First, there are a plethora of models for things in the world. I have ideas of how water flows, models for that. I have ideas about how politics works, models for that. I even have models for how certain games work, and these models guide how I play them. To discuss the most fundamental principles, when each of these models has principles fit to its domain, and largely fundamentals irreplaceable by the fundamental principles of another model. For example, try understanding love using the fundamental principles of your understanding of mathematics. Requires a way to find the most fundamental model, and this requires the question, fundamental to what criteria? Now, the purpose of models is to more than survive, to thrive in the given domain. Now, each of these goals requires knowledge, therefore, of that domain and what constitutes thriving within it. And from this idea, I draw the idea that the most fundamental model is knowledge, and I would consider the most fundamental principles those of the theory of knowledge, a model for knowledge, epistemology. This is confirmed afterwards by recognizing that questions of what is known or knowable occur during the creation of any model, and so in epistemology we find principles assured to be found at work in all other models, making epistemology the most fundamental model. The fundamentals of what we know trace for me to the knowledge that there is perception happening, which in English we put as I perceive, though we do not know in fact if we perceive, something else perceives for us, or what I really means. But we do know there are the perceptions, and that we can sense them. In fact, we can hardly have any option to not sense them, to not perceive. The most fundamental truth of my epistemology, therefore, is the one fact that I perceive, and that I have at my disposal images called perceptions. They are real, certainly, only insofar as they are images which really exist as images. What they correspond to is a higher level question of epistemology, one which ultimately can have no definite answer, since there is no way to derive such an answer from this most fundamental existence of perceptions as perceptions. The second most fundamental principles of epistemology are two rules through which all facts must be analyzed, and to which they must adhere: skepticism and relativism. Skepticism, put simply, is the idea that any model is subject to further refinement and improvement, and insofar as some models can be perfected no more, this limitation is an aspect of the model, not what is modeled, and so in that case the whole model is what is subject to doubt, and search for a better model, when able to improve, is advisable. Relativism is the idea that all truths, be they models or even perceptions themselves, are relative to some frame of reference. The question is not, is a statement true, so much as, is a statement true relative to what? It is true that unicorns have Is it true that unicorns have horns? Yes, relative to the domain of all ideas, for the idea of a unicorn, which constitutes its only form of existence, does include it having a horn. From the frame of reference of materialism, and of material reality, however, the unicorn has no horn, no body, no anything, and therefore it would not be true relative to materialism to say the unicorn has anything at all except representation within a mind.